The Speaker has been, in effect, ousted. Mr Martin told the House of Commons this afternoon in a very terse statement that he will resign on Sunday, June the 21st, and a new Speaker will be elected the following day. Mr Martin's decision means probably a by-election in his constituency of Glasgow North East. We'll have all the details and the reaction, but first this evening, Joe Coburn on the day's events.
At 2:30 and in hushed tones, MPs filled every corner of the chamber. Some of them had even applauded Michael Martin as he walked through the Commons. They were expecting a dramatic resignation speech, but instead, there was this.
Order, order. Since I came to this House 30 years ago, I have always felt that the House is at its best when it is united. In order that unity can be maintained, I have decided that I will relinquish the office of Speaker on Sunday, 21st of June. This will allow the House to proceed to elect a new Speaker on Monday, 22nd of June. That is all I have to say in this matter. Order.
Michael Martin had done what many MPs had been calling for, but in the end it was a huge anticlimax. Many just turned and left the chamber as the Foreign Secretary stood up and moved on to the day's other business.
Mr Speaker, the whole House will respect your wish that we proceed with our business today. We shall make our tributes at a later date.
It felt almost unseemly. Having effectively forced out the Speaker, some members had wanted the chance to mark his departure. One MP who'd backed him did speak out.
The Foreign Secretary would care to join with me in paying the warmest possible tribute to you, sir, and thanking you for your service to this House and to this country over many years. A very honourable service.
But the dissent was in black and white. 23 MPs had signed a no-confidence motion in him. The man behind it said Michael Martin had to go.
It's been an extremely unpleasant week, and I did this regretting having to do it, but it had to be done. You can't clean up a cesspit without doing some unpleasant things.
Michael Martin's been under fire for some time for his attempts to exclude MPs from freedom of information requests, for not stopping the police raid on Tory MP Damien Green's parliamentary office.
Order.
But it's been his role in defending the discredited expenses system and yesterday's faltering Commons performance that finally led to his downfall. It was also different nearly 9 years ago when Michael Martin was ceremonially dragged to the Speaker's chair, cheered on by members.
Hello.
The Glasgow MP started out as a former sheet metal worker who became a union shop steward before entering Parliament. Back in his constituency, there will be a by-election. It's one of Labour's safest seats in Scotland, but it could become a referendum on the whole expenses crisis.
Every MP has made a mistake here. And how should one guy be made a scapegoat for that?
I think the man tried his best and he got found out for what he was.
A new Commons Speaker will be elected on June the 22nd, and already potential successors are being talked about. But it'll take much more than just changing the Speaker to improve the standing of Parliament and the reputation of MPs. Joe Coburn, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, the expenses scandal is now leading, it seems, to some radical changes. The Prime Minister said a short while ago at a news conference in Downing Street that the Commons could no longer operate as a gentleman's club, those were his words, and must move to a system of outside independent regulation. Mr Brown also said that Labour MPs who'd broken the rules would not be allowed to stand again. And on the Conservative side, the senior MP Douglas Hogg, who's been criticised for his expenses claims, announced that he wouldn't be standing at the next Parliament. In the meantime, MPs are still waiting for the results of an official inquiry into the system that's caused so much turmoil here in recent weeks. Carol Walker looks at the likely changes.
Have to have two homes.
This is the Conservative MP whose moat came to symbolise all that's wrong with the expenses system.
Consequently, the cleaning and the maintenance and the overkeep and the looking after has to be done by somebody. And I think it's perfectly proper that should be covered as to a proportion by the allowance which is for that very purpose.
In fact, Douglas Hogg denied he'd ever claimed for his moat to be cleaned. But today he announced he'll stand down at the next election. In future, MPs may not have the luxury of choosing the time of their own departures. The MPs Elliot Morley and David Chater have been suspended from the Labour Party over allegations they claimed for mortgages they'd paid off. They could be barred from standing for Parliament again. Labour's national executive has agreed on the deselection of any MP found guilty of wrongdoing by a special panel set up to rule on MPs' expenses.
No Member of Parliament and no candidate will stand for the Labour Party at the next election if they've defied the rules. No minister will be in the Cabinet or in the government in future if it is proven that they have defied the rules.
The cosy self-regulation of Parliament will be replaced by independent management. Under plans approved by the Cabinet this morning, MPs' pay and allowances and the disciplinary system will be put in the hands of a body separate from the Commons, a far-reaching proposal that not everyone likes.
With respect, it's precisely because our elected lawmakers have devolved too much decision-making to so-called independent quangos. That's one of the reasons why people have given up on politics in the first place. Let's restore purpose and dignity to our democracy.
Once you say to members of Parliament, you've got to take power out of this House, they immediately cry protest.
MPs know their lives and lifestyles will have to change if they're to win back the trust of the public. But getting agreement on a new set of rules and a system for enforcing them is the hard part.
Within the last half hour, it's emerged the party leaders have reached agreement in principle, not just on MPs' expenses, but on sweeping changes to the way Parliament is run. The Prime Minister said there'd be new limits on how much MPs can claim and what they can claim for, all overseen by an independent commission.
These are big changes. They change centuries of history for Parliament. But to move from self-regulation to statutory independent regulation is, in my view, the only way forward now.
We can have all the changes in the rules, all the money being paid back in the world, but the public want to be able to say who represents them in Parliament. They want a new Parliament with a new Speaker.
So another dramatic day at Westminster has brought at least the outline of a plan to transform the system which has blackened the reputation of Parliament. Carol Walker, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, we saw the Prime Minister there at that news conference at number 10 Downing Street, which I should tell you was still going on just a few minutes ago, taking lots of questions on today's developments. Our political editor, Nick Robinson, was there. Nick's in Downing Street. Nick, we'll come to the measures and the reforms in a second, but your thoughts first of all on the enforced departure of the Speaker.
Well, many MPs were angry that Michael Martin had been forced to resign. One of them declared all the poor man tried to do was represent the majority of members of Parliament. That might be his greatest defence, Hugh, but it is also his greatest damnation. He tried to represent the majority of MPs when it turns out they were hopelessly out of touch with the views of their electors. Thus, he supervised a system of allowances and expenses which was out of control. He fought the right of ordinary taxpayers to know what was going on and what was being paid for what. He did not take on those who resisted reform, and he didn't use the authority of his office to either apologise for MPs until the last possible moment or to tell them they had to get their act together. In the end, I think the reason he is no longer Speaker, or won't be soon, Hugh, is when the Parliament needed leadership, he didn't show it.
Nick, interesting to hear the Prime Minister underlining some of the reforms that might come at the end of all of this turmoil. What did he have to say?
Well, he is presenting what he clearly thinks is a big idea, the end of what he calls self-regulation of the Commons, the end of a set of rules, he says, that are appropriate for a gentleman's club. So instead of what we now discuss, which is which MPs design the rules and which unseen officials actually supervise them, there will be a new outside body that will do all of that. All the rules, all the payments, all the disputes done by an outside body, and it seems the opposition parties are in broad agreement with that.
Nick, thanks for now. We'll talk to you again in a few moments' time. We'll be back at Westminster before the end of the programme. We'll be talking to voters and asking them what they think of events today and whether it's changed anything. But in the meantime, George, back to you.
All right, Hugh, thank you. And in other news tonight, the man behind the July 7th terror attacks in London was under surveillance for 4 years.